What would you do if a boy under 10 wearing torn shoes held together with duct tape suddenly walked up and said, "I can help your daughter walk again"? And what if it turned out to be true? That morning in Birmingham, Alabama, the cold was quiet and still. Not cold enough for snow, but enough for every breath to turn to mist, and for fingertips to go numb in the wind. People rushed in and out of the Children's Medical Center on Fifth Avenue, wrapped in scarves, clutching coffee cups, walking fast as if escaping whatever had brought them there. But one person wasn't moving at all. It was a boy, sitting on a piece of cardboard near the turnstile, quietly sketching something in an old notebook. His name was Ezekiel, Zeke for short, 9 years old. His coat was one size too big, sleeves rolled up, and one of his boots was held together with thick layers of duct tape. A red knit hat covered his forehead, draped over his ears, leaving only part of his face exposed. He didn't beg, didn't ask for help, he just sat there and observed, watching the constant flow of people coming and going. He was usually there every Saturday morning. At first, some hospital staff had tried to help him, asked questions when they first saw him, but eventually they gave up. Zeke never caused any trouble. He smiled when spoken to. When not, he stayed quietly focused on his notebook. He just observed and listened, missing nothing. Most people assumed maybe his parents were patients inside. Maybe he had 6 siblings. Maybe he was just waiting for someone to pick him up. But no one ever asked much more than that. In places like that, people don't ask. Across the street, a silver Range Rover was parked beside a fire hydrant. The engine was still running, but the driver hadn't gotten out. Inside was Jonathan Reeves, a man in his 40s, angular face with salt and pepper hair. His tie, loosely, collar wrinkled. He was wealthy. You could tell from the way his car gleamed, even under the hospital's fluorescent lights. But his eyes looked drained, like a gas tank hitting empty. In the back seat sat Isla, his 6-year-old daughter, resting in a booster seat. Her curly brown hair was pinned to one side, legs curled under a pink blanket. Her eyes wide open, but she said nothing. Accident had changed everything. Just minutes before, she was climbing trees and racing her cousins in the backyard. Then suddenly she was paralyzed from the waist down, sitting there in silence. Jonathan opened the car door, gently lifted Isla into his arms, and walked toward the hospital entrance. At first, he didn't even notice Zeke. Just like most people, but Zeke noticed him. He saw how Jonathan held Isla, as if she might shatter if he let go. Isla kept her eyes fixed on the sky, away from the building. Zeke watched them longer than usual. Then, just as they were about to pass, he stood up and called out, "Sir, I can help your daughter walk." Jonathan froze mid-step, not because he was offended or confused, but because of how the words were spoken. Not like a joke, not like a sales pitch. Just simple ha-ha, calm, clear, and full of belief, as if Zeke truly meant it. Jonathan turned around, squinting at the boy. "What did you just say?" Zeke didn't flinch. He took a step forward, notebook clutched under his arm. "I said I can help her walk again." Jonathan stared at him, still holding Isla tightly. "That's not funny, kid. I'm not joking." Zeke's voice didn't waver. There was no smile, only the stillness of someone far older than he looked. Jonathan glanced at the boy's clothes, taped-up shoes, broken glasses hanging from his collar. Maybe it was some weird coincidence, or worse, a scam. He turned away and walked into the hospital without saying another word. But inside he couldn't stop thinking about it. It wasn't the kind of sentence filled with hope or vagueness. It was the kind that felt like a fact. Something in that voice echoed in Jonathan's mind, playing over and over, until he turned back. Jonathan tried to push the boy out of his thoughts. Over the next few hours he listened. Isla's appointments, the nods from doctors, the usual phrases from neurologists and physical therapists. They all repeated familiar lines: "Prepare yourself. It'll be a long road. Miracles take time." He'd heard it all before, but Zeke's words kept echoing in his mind, like an itch he couldn't scratch. "I can help your daughter walk again?" By early afternoon, Jonathan and Isla exited the building. The sun had broken through the clouds, but the cold still lingered. He walked toward the car, carrying Isla as usual, and then saw Zeke again, still there. Same box, same notebook. But this time the boy looked straight at Jonathan, as if he knew he'd be back. Jonathan. He hesitated. He glanced at his flock. Her head rested on his shoulder, eyes closed. Her body felt too light for a 6-year-old. He turned back. You again, he muttered, stepping forward. Where'd you say that? You think this is some kind of joke? Zeke shook his head slowly. You don't even know who she is, Jonathan snapped, gently placing Isla into the back seat. You don't know what she's been through. You don't know what we've been through. But Zeke didn't back down. I don't need to know to help. Jonathan straightened up, voice tense. How old are you? How old? Almost 9. You're just a boy sitting outside a hospital with duct-taped shoes. What could you possibly know about helping someone like my daughter? Cracked basketball court, a couple of creaky swings, a lawn that looked like a forgotten football field. On Sundays, the place was usually deserted, especially around noon. But that day, Zeke was already there, sitting at a bench near the largest oak tree in the park. He still wore that oversized coat, but his notebook was tucked away. Instead, he kept a small gym bag at his feet, with a neatly folded towel on the bench beside him. Right on time, Jonathan's SUV pulled up. At first, he said nothing, just quietly lifted Isla, placed her in the wheelchair, and pushed her toward Zeke. Looked the boy in the eyes. His arms crossed, expression tight like he regretted coming. Zeke stood as they approached. Good to see you again, sir, he said politely. Jonathan gave a stiff nod. Isla waved shyly. Zeke smiled at her. Hi, Isla. Her eyes lit up a little. Hi, she whispered. Jonathan raised an eyebrow. How do you know her name? You said it yesterday, Zeke replied. I remember some things. Jonathan didn't respond. He motioned toward the towel. What now? Magic carpet ride? Zeke ignored the sarcasm. No, sir. Just the basics. He opened the bag and pulled out a pair of socks, a tennis ball, a jar of cocoa butter, and a cloth bag filled with something that looked like warm rice wrapped in fabric. Jonathan squinted. This what your mom used? Zeke nodded. Rice holds heat. Helps loosen tight muscles. The bowl adds pressure. Jonathan crossed his arms again. Zeke turned to Isla. If it's okay, I'd like to work on your legs a bit. It won't hurt. I promise. If anything feels strange, just say, stop. Okay? Isla looked up at her father. Jonathan exhaled. Go ahead. Just be careful. Zeke knelt beside the wheelchair. Gently, he pulled back the blanket and placed the warm rice bag on Isla's lap. Isa flinched slightly. Too hot? Zeke asked. She shook her head. It feels nice. Zeke nodded and waited. A few minutes later, he began gently moving Isla's legs. No jerking, no pressing, just a soft rotation side to side, up and down. Jonathan watched closely, ready to intervene if anything seemed off. But there was nothing was wrong. Have you done this before? He asked with suspicion. Zeke didn't lift his head. After school, my mom used to take me to the shelter for veterans. She helped people who couldn't afford treatment. She said, everyone deserves to feel like a human being again. I just used to carry her bags. Jonathan raised an eyebrow. And she taught you all of this? Yes, the human body is as complicated as people think. You just have to pay attention. He gently tapped Isla's knee. Do you feel anything? No, she whispered. Zeke nodded again, not even slightly rattled. It's okay. I'll keep checking. He kept talking to her as he worked, asking about her favorite colors, favorite food, and the shows she liked to watch. At first, Isla responded with short answers, but soon she began to ask questions back. Do you live around here? Do you go to school? I used to. Where are they now? Where did you stop? Zeke hesitated. My mom got sick and passed away. Working in the business, I've been figuring things out since then. Isla lowered her head. I'm sorry. Zeke smiled gently at her. Thank you. Jonathan seemed to soften a little, but he still didn't say anything. About 10 minutes later, Zeke lightly tapped Isla's ankle. Do you feel anything now? Isla blinked. And like pressure. Zeke looked up at Jonathan. That's good. Jonathan narrowed his eyes. He says that sometimes during normal therapy. Right, Zeke nodded. But those sessions happen in rooms full of machines. Sometimes, kids are afraid of machines. They tighten up. But here, he pointed toward the park. There's air. There's nature. It feels different. Jonathan didn't say anything, but this time he was clearly listening. Zeke helped Isla stretch out both legs, then guided her through a few tiny toe movements. Small sways back and forth. Isla tried. Dramatic happened, but she wasn't discouraged. I'll come back next week, Zeke said as he stood. It'll take time, but your muscles are still there. He pointed to her thigh. They still remember how to work? They just need reminding. This time, Isla smiled a little brighter. Jonathan cleared his throat. We're not promising anything, he said quickly. Zeke nodded. Me neither. I'm just trying. Jonathan stared at the boy for a long moment. Then suddenly, he reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a folded bill and held it out. Zeke stepped back. No, sir, I don't want your money. Jonathan looked surprised. Then why are you doing this? Zeke shrugged. Because your daughter is smiling? Jonathan looked down at Isla. She was still smiling, but he couldn't understand how a boy who had lost everything could give so much to a girl he barely knew. The next Sunday was warmer, but Zeke still wore his jacket. Not because of the cold, but because it made him feel closer to his mom. He used to call it the healer's coat, she said. Every good healer needs something to remind them why they started. He returned to Harrington Park right on time. Towels spread out, supplies neatly arranged, and a water bottle placed beside them. A few kids were shooting hoops at the nearby court, a dog barking in the distance. Right at noon, Jonathan's car pulled in. Asa was smiling before the vehicle even stopped. Zeke waved. Hi, Isla. Hi, she murmured, curls bouncing as Jonathan helped her into the wheelchair. Jonathan still looked tired. But this time something was different, less heavy. He gave Zeke a small nod. Not a word, but more than last week. Zeke got to work, still setting up, still wrapping the warm towel, but this time something had shifted. Isla was trying. Can you press your heel into the ground? Zeke asked softly. She closed her eyes, focused. Nothing happened. It's okay, Zeke reassured. Sometimes the brain needs time to find the right pathway. It's like pushing through a crowd. You just have to wiggle your way in. Jonathan stood behind the two kids, arms folded, but this time it was to stay warm, not out of defense. Whether you're doing all of this? He asked abruptly. Zeke looked up. Because I remember how it felt when my mom helped. She made them feel like they still mattered. I want to do the same. Jonathan nodded slowly. You've never thought about doing something else? Sometimes, Zeke replied. But this feels right. Jonathan looked at Isla. She was tapping her toes lightly. It was small, but real. They were still moving. For the first time, Jonathan didn't say a word. He just stood and watched. A few weeks later, they kept coming back. Same time, same park. Zeke taught Isla how to use resistance bands to strengthen her ankles. He rolled tennis balls under her feet to help her brain remember where they were. He showed Jonathan how to massage behind the knees and explained how each nerve had a job even when it was quiet. And then came the hard day. It was the fourth Sunday. Zeke showed up. Just like always. But this time, when the SUV pulled up, Isla wasn't smiling. Her eyes were red. Jonathan looked angry. "She doesn't want to practice today," he said sharply while setting her in the chair. Isla turned away, not looking at either of them. Zeke approached slowly. "What happened?" Isla folded her arms. "I tried to move my legs this morning, but nothing happened. Not even a little. I'm tired of trying. It's pointless." Jonathan looked away, jaw tight. "She's been down all week," he muttered. Zeke nodded slowly. He knelt beside Isla again. "You think I'm never tired?" Isla stayed quiet. "You think I never sat in a shelter crying because my mom couldn't afford the medicine, and I just watched helplessly?" Isla looked up, locking eyes with him. "You're allowed to be angry. I've been angry too. What if you give up now? The part of you that wants to walk might give up too." Isla looked down at the ground. "I don't want you to quit," Zeke said softly. "Because I haven't quit." Silence. Then Isla whispered, "I'm scared." Jonathan turned sharply. It was the first time she'd said that out loud. Zeke leaned in closer. "I'm scared too, but being scared doesn't mean you stop. It just means you're close to something amazing." Isla wiped her tears. "Okay, let's try again." And they did. Zeke guided the movements gently. Less talk this time, just presence and patience. Jonathan joined in more, helping her shift her weight, encouraging every tiny twitch. After nearly half an hour, Isla moved her right leg, not just her toes, but her whole foot. It slid forward, slow and stiff, but it moved. Jonathan knelt down beside her, blinking as if unsure what he was seeing. "Do it again," he said. Isla did. Zeke smiled, but said nothing. He simply stepped back and watched. That night, Jonathan stood on his porch on Crestview Road, staring up at the moon. He no longer cared who Zeke really was. That question didn't matter anymore. Inside the house, Isla was giggling, retelling the moment her foot moved to her aunt over the phone. For the first time in months, their house didn't feel like a hospital room. It felt like a home again. But something inside Jonathan had begun to shift. Not just Isla's legs, but the weight in his chest, the burden of guilt, pride, and the wall he'd built between himself and the world. It was starting to crack. Monday afternoon, Jonathan sat in his office, staring at an untouched contract. His phone buzzed non-stop. Emails, calls, updates from clients, but now, none of it felt urgent. What kept looping in his mind was that moment in the park. Isla's foot sliding forward as if it really belonged to her. He had seen it with his own eyes. And the one who made it happen was a kid nobody knew, in taped-up shoes, living like a ghost. Jonathan opened his laptop and typed, "Ezekiel Carter, Birmingham." Nothing showed up, just a few old community posts. He clicked through local newsletters and school databases. There were a few mentions of Zeke and his mother. Monique Carter, at a community clinic. No address, no recent info. Jonathan closed his laptop and leaned back. This kid might be a ghost. But clearly he wasn't. By Saturday they returned to Harrington Park, but this time everything felt different. Jonathan brought a mat and a folding chair. When they met Zeke, he handed the boy a sandwich. No words, just quietly set it beside the training bag. Zeke nodded softly in thanks and tucked it away to eat later. "Ready, Isla?" Zeke asked. She threw her thumb up high. "Let's do this together," and they began. Warm compress, stretching, toe curls. Today Jonathan was fully involved. He sat cross-legged in the grass, doing each move as Zeke guided. "You messed that one up. Bent the wrong way," Zeke chuckled. Jonathan shot him a look. "I haven't stretched since college." They both laughed. So did Isla. Nearly 30 minutes later, Zeke leaned forward. "Okay, Isla, let's try something new." He pulled out a support strap, placed it across her knees, and showed Jonathan how to hold each end. "Now she'll try to lift both knees, just a little." We'll help her keep her balance. Isla controlled the movement. Jonathan looked hesitant. Are you sure? Zeke nodded. 9 days of laying towels on grass, 9 days of Isla's knees improving, 9 days of small victories shared with strangers who were starting to feel like family. But today felt different. Zeke could sense it before they even reached the park. The air was warmer. The trees swayed a little slower. Even Isla was quieter in the back seat, like she was preparing for something big. When they arrived, a small crowd had already gathered. No noise, no show, just families unfolding chairs, physical therapists kneeling beside children, parents holding on to hope. And in the center of it all, the old wooden bench beneath the familiar oak tree. At first, Zeke said nothing. He just opened his bag, spread the towel, and looked at Isla. Are you ready? She nodded. No smile. Just that serious look. Determination. Jonathan wheeled Isla to the center of the mat. Zeke knelt in front of her. Just like always, he said softly. We'll help you up. The rest is up to you. Jonathan stepped behind her, placing his hands under her arms. Zeke guided her legs into position. Ready? Zeke whispered. And 3. Isla closed her eyes. 2, 3. Jonathan lifted her. Zeke steadied her knees, and then Isla stood. Her legs shook. Her arms trembled, but she stood. On her own 2 feet. The crowd fell silent. A few children gasped. A mother covered her mouth. Isa slowly opened her eyes and smiled. I'm standing? Zeke blinked, as if wiping something away. Yes, you are. Jonathan froze, unable to breathe. Then he let go. She was still standing. He stepped back, hands trembling. She did it. Zeke stepped back too, just slightly. Isla had done it. She took a shaky step, then another, and because she was only 6, brave and fearless. She took a 3rd step completely on her own before falling into her father's arms. Jonathan caught her, laughing, and held her close. You did it, he whispered. You really did it? Isla turned to Zeke. I told you I would. Zeke smiled gently. You said we'd try. That afternoon, no one left the park quickly. Everyone stayed, talking, hugging, some whispering prayers. Zeke sat on the bench, quietly watching it all. He didn't say much. He never really did. That night, Jonathan stood in the kitchen while Zeke poured cereal into a bowl. You know, you've changed everything, he said without turning around. Zeke didn't look up. Jonathan stepped closer, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. My daughter stood today not because of the hospital or a doctor or some miracle drug, but because of a kid no one knew who kept showing up, even when nobody asked him to. Zeke nodded. That's what my mom used to do. Jonathan's throat tightened. I wish she could have seen this. She did, Zeke replied softly, eyes still on the cereal. I think she saw it all. Jonathan wiped his eyes. Zeke, he said gently, you're going to change a lot of lives. Zeke looked up at him. I already have. There are people in this world without fancy degrees, polished resumes, or spotless pasts, but they carry something far more valuable. A heart, resilience, and a reason to keep showing up. Sometimes, the ones who've been broken hold the tools that help others heal. If this story touched you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it. And if you know a kid like Zeke or a girl like Isla, tell them this. You matter. You are needed.